Hello, everyone. My name is Sunmesh. I look forward to starting the last workshop in about 2 minutes or so. People are trickling in, so I'm just going to give some time to get them and come and settle in. As we do that, in fact, we can get started. Some of you can really talk about who you are, your name, country, and why did you attend? Why did you attend the first or second sessions all together? So it'll be good for us to know. This is going to be a very exciting session today. It's a series that we started 2 months ago with the partnership of Miller Center. And as you settle in, I would appreciate if you can start introducing yourself in a chat window, not in a QA, but in a chat window altogether. So please do share your name, country. Did you attend the first and second sessions? And maybe you want to talk about what are you learning from these sessions? Okay, so we will get started now. So I know some of you are still trickling in. So, but in fairness of time, I want to make sure that there's a lot of the content that we have today to share with you to really help you build the capacity in your organization. So, just as a reminder, my name is Unmesh. I'm a founder and CEO of Sopact. Today is the last workshop of a series that we started a while ago. In fact, the first series was focusing on impact strategy that we shared an open source toolkit called IMM Toolkit. Many of you actually went ahead and filled out that toolkit, and we also encourage a lot of you to really complete that toolkit and give the feedback because feedback is very important in creating and optimizing the impact measurement and management practices altogether. So that was the first session. We also shared that on the YouTube, and hopefully you had a chance to also go over that. And if you haven't, please go through that. It's couple of times, and you will really practice more. You practice more, you're likely to improve your strategy altogether. In the last session, we talked about data strategy, where Lorena went through many different type of data type, from demographics data types to operational data type to impact-related data. Essentially, there's a process that and workflow that we provided to you so that you can identify right source of the data and ultimately come up with the right kind of data collection process. Because just because you have impact strategy doesn't mean that you can start aggregating the data faster and better so that you can get better insight. So there was a lot of best practices were shared. And again, if you haven't gone through that, we encourage you to go through that after the session. Those sessions are available from Sopact websites, and you can go through the past webinar there as well. Today, it's my privilege to have the last session where we'll first start by Andy, who is leading this program from Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship. And he will kick off this session today with the idea of introducing what Miller Center is all about, and essentially why we started this program in first place altogether, and what is the objective in the long run when we work with the social entrepreneurs in building and scaling their operations altogether. And followed by that, essentially, we also have Madhu provide detailed walkthrough on how you can use some of the impact management principles and create a very fast and effective data collection process and the analytics to learn and improve the product market fit and essentially also raise the impact capital altogether. So before I just introduce the topic, I would love to invite you to Andy, who can talk about the program.
Great. Thank you, Umesh, and thank you, everyone. Great to see so many different folks joining in, and just from looking at what's going on in the chat, a wide range of folks from different countries, different sectors. Wonderful to see. And I think, as Umesh mentioned, for those who didn't attend the first and second webinar, those recordings are available. And also to see that there are a lot of repeat folks that are back for the third that have been getting a lot out of this series. So from Miller Center's point of view, we're very excited to be working with Sopact on this webinar series, and more broadly, we've been working with Sopact for a couple of years now in tight partnership. So for those that don't know Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship, we're part of Santa Clara University here in Silicon Valley, and our focus is on helping social entrepreneurs around the world accelerate entrepreneurship to address global poverty and protect the planet. So we run accelerator programs for established social enterprises in climate resilience and or women's economic empowerment. Those programs are offered virtually, totally online, with mentoring, access to content, access to our platform, access to our community. It's no cost for social entrepreneurs. You do have to be up and running with ideally 2 to 3 employees minimum, $20,000 to $30,000 of revenue minimum. Many of the entrepreneurs that come through our programs are much further along than that. I'll put the link in the chat. We're always recruiting entrepreneurs. So if you take a look at the information, and you can reach out to us there. And as part of going through our program, you get access not only to Sopact's great content, but directly to the Sopact team, in addition to the mentors we provide, in addition to other partners that we work with, like Duke, Case Impact Capital, their content. So it's a way to get a lot of extra resources to grow your business. So please do, I'll put the link in the chat here. Have a look at that. And you can also join our mailing list and things like that. But, for this webinar series, again, really grateful to Sopact. We've been working with them for a couple of years now, doing these kinds of events for the ecosystem, but also they've been really helping build our own capacity in Miller Center in the area of impact assessment with our staff, with our mentor pool, and with the entrepreneurs we work with. So we're really delighted to have such a strong, focused partner in Sopact. And so I hope everyone enjoys the webinar today. So with that, I'll turn it back to the Sopact team. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. This is a wonderful introduction, and I really appreciate it. And we're again looking forward to building a strong relationship and making social entrepreneurs successful. As part of our journey, every social entrepreneur we work with, things are just getting improved one step at a time, because it's the process of working with the impact measure management. And the way we work and the way we also encourage social entrepreneurs to do is to continuous loop-based approach. And this is obviously a Silicon Valley buzz, but essentially it's not just Silicon Valley. It's really how most businesses become successful. And I think you will today in sessions will go through a very practical example on how can we use continuous loop, what we call as the impact experiment, which is really in a short way to say fast and frequent experiments that you do to grow your business, grow your impact, both essentially. And so our goal is to make sure that you improve outcome and profit both using these techniques all together. And so with that approach, I want to make sure that you really have a very right tool today to, once you design your impact strategy and data strategy, how can you take it to the next level so that you can put that as part of the daily business processes altogether to improve your impact management process. So to give an idea of how we plan to run this session today, I'll do some quick recap of the session 1 and 2. Madhu will go into 4 other topics, which is how to use the data, how to structure the data, how to design the dashboard, and we will go through some Q&A. Again, as a reminder, please chat and introduce yourself in a chat window. Do not talk about, give introduction in the Q&A. Q&A only keep it reserved for asking questions only, and we'll answer those questions as you really write it over there. So first is that we want to really go over some of the key things in a session one, which really we talked about impact management and management toolkit. We introduced the ways to identify the right impact thesis or goal. And based on that, we start with the first is to stakeholders. Stakeholders are central to impact measurement and management. And based on the stakeholder, you design series of impact experiments, which is really in a short form, it's a right way of identifying the outcome that you can focus on. And we also mentioned that most people start with a theory of change or logic model or log frame approach, but fundamentally, all of them, people tend to get carried away and they tend to make it more complex than necessary. Many of the outcome and output they're defined, they're not even simply achievable. Many of them are actually imposed by some of the funders as well. And we want to make sure that in order to grow the impact measurement, it has to be very practical and actionable altogether. And so we gave you a toolkit to help you identify those core outcome, define the theory of change, which is very lightweight, identify how to really ask effective questions to stakeholders aligned towards 5 dimensions of impact. And that is the foundational of essentially not only asking effective questions, but also communicating impact to your team as well as the funders. In the session 2, we talked about how to design effective survey questions, how to pick the right data collection tool, and we also give you the best practices for data analysis part of it. So what is the current state of impact measurement management? So if you see this picture carefully, on left-hand side, this is really the real state of how most people do it. So they have a different volunteers and staff. They identify the activities, and this activities essentially invites on how to report on those activities and output altogether. Typically, there are a couple of approaches people use. One approach is that they have their own internal staff. Oftentimes, that internal staff is very limited in the knowledge as well as the bandwidth, both essentially. That essentially is responsible for responding back to the funders, but hardly ever in this particular process there is any learning that comes out, partly because you are trying to satisfy the funders' output and activity requirements. If there is year-round, you collect the data, but essentially there is not much learning that comes out of it. Another approach, oftentimes funders use them, is they hire the third party or the external evaluators and say, hey, go and I've funded this $500,000 of programs or $1 million program, and go and evaluate and see what is the outcome they're creating. Again, there's a limitation of this approach. First of all, they're spending very limited resources for the evaluation. Most of the learning actually goes out to the funders and not necessarily the organization who's working very close to that. And so this exercise that we are talking about is quite different. This exercise is more about essentially you being in charge, you being owner of your impact data strategy. And it's not about impact by itself. Impact and the business goal are really tied together. And so using this tight loop approach that you see on the right-hand side, essentially by designing right strategy, collecting right and effective data and learnings, and doing a short and frequent one, you often can improve your business and impact successes very fast, essentially. And that's the key to this messaging of this workshop. It's not about collecting year-round data and reporting to the funders perspective. That we know that you're going to do that. In fact, you can do that as byproduct of this exercise altogether. But if you use these techniques, not only you can scale your social businesses faster, but also your reporting can also become quite effective. your ability to communicate the impact also becomes effective altogether. So that's a key to the foundation. So today, Madhu will take two actionable examples and walk you through those things. So I hope you will pay close attention to some of the techniques that he will teach you based on some of the learnings that we've been doing from some of the field. So I would like to invite Madhu, but before I do that, I also want to do one announcement. So as you know, we have been sharing a lot of these techniques and best practices, but we also want to make sure this becomes more practical and convenient. So we are working on very cool impact strategy, which is a SaaS-based application. And we are looking for design partners who can provide and work with us and become providing proper feedback to such that we can share this tool to hundreds and thousands of users altogether. And so after this particular session, we will be sending out email to you. So please look out for that email. And it's a short email with a short survey. And if you fill out those things, we'll pick the best design partners and we'll be in touch with you. And that will be very useful for your own team, as well as the others who you may be working with all together. So look for that email. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Madhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Unmesh, and welcome everyone again. My name is Madhukar Prabhakar. I'm a product manager here at Sopact. So as Unmesh said, session 1 was about your theory of change, how to strategize. Session 2 was about, hey, like what are the different sources of data? What kind of questions can we ask the stakeholders to understand our products and services better? And by the way, even programs, when I'm going to use consistently products and services, but please, I mean, you can replace that word with program or, project areas that you work at. Before, we begin, we had this small poll that we wanted to conduct to understand the audience better, who is joining us in these webinars, and, what is it, where exactly, what state are they in? So I'm going to launch this question, and we'd be very grateful if all of you can answer this question. We'll give it about a minute so we can get in the responses.
Thank you. We have 72% participation. We need remaining 28 people, 28% now. Very good. Whether we can maybe end the poll.
Any last responses that people want to put in before we end the poll? Perfect.
Okay, should I end the poll?
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you so much, everyone. Really grateful that you even cared or bothered to respond to our poll question. Let me share my screen, and we are going to get started now. I hope everyone is able to see my screen. I'm going to put this in full screen. So this session is about more practical things. I'm going to walk you through a complete scenario, right? From taking an example strategy or theory of change. A lot of us follow theory of change framework. I'm going to walk you through a real example. I'll also show you like how the data is typically structured when we work with the organizations, what kind of techniques or skills you would need in order to draw insights from the data, from that sample data that I have created. And then I'll walk you through the dashboard, like how we generally design a typical impact demonstrable dashboard. But keep in mind that depending on the audience, obviously you would change the design of the dashboard. This session is more about, hey, I want to learn more from my data, and maybe you want to present those things to your funders. Maybe you want to raise like follow-on funding. And things definitely, I see things changing. Like things are getting serious. Like funders are demanding more quality in data and not just operational numbers. So before we begin, in what ways can we use data? The first one, which we are going to cover today, is for decision making or analytics, or to really analyze if our products and services are working. What can we do better? It is from that perspective you would obviously want to use the data. And then there is another breed of organizations that want to collect data and report on it to comply with certain standards. It could be ESG, it could be supply chain. There could be certain bodies that certify you on a few things, and they're important because without that certification, your business probably cannot operate. So from that external reporting perspective, also you would be able to design the reporting or the dashboard. Then you have additionality or capacity building. Now think accelerators or funders. When they work with entrepreneurs, they are sort of helping them on various aspects. So they can think of their additionality. They can think of, like how are they contributing towards a social enterprise or non-profit's success or an organization's success. So the dashboard can also be from that perspective. In that sense, the third one is not very different than the first one. It's just that the way we strategize early on and how we ask questions differ, because now we are not really asking questions of the stakeholders. We are actually asking the companies to report on certain parameters, certain numbers. So that changes, but then in essence, the analytics part remains the same. And then the fourth one is most of us, we want to design dashboards, or we want to use data in a way so that we are able to grow and get the next funding, maybe to invest in better, in building better products and services, or to serve a different stakeholder than what we are already doing. So you obviously need funding for that. So there is that aspect as well. But today's session is more going to be about the first point, which is analyzing data for your own internal decision making. And I'm not saying you cannot use this data for, let's say, to report to your funders or an investor that's investing in you. I'm just saying this is the perspective is more from learning than any sort of reporting or demonstration point of view. So let's get started. Even before that, like, why bother with data? I wanted to include this slide because I really wanted to bring out Sopact's perspective on this. Now, it's hard. I wouldn't say it's way harder, but it's definitely hard. It takes some work to put together this whole analytics framework, to come up with your theory of change, come up with like actionable data points. It does take work. It's not like you would just wake up in the morning and you would do all of these things and it will be ready in front of you. It won't be that easy. Our reasons, obviously, on why organizations should bother on this is, one, to even stand a remote possibility of improving your products and services and to reach a certain point, there is literally no alternative. You need to be analyzing in some shape or form how your products and services are doing. There is just like literally no alternative. And this holds true even for nonprofits. I'm not just talking about like for-profit enterprises or even social enterprises. even for nonprofits, if you want to stand a chance at improving your products and services, you have to involve in this. Second, like to differentiate yourself. Like I cannot tell you, out of like 100 organizations, probably 3 or 4 do this whole process seriously. No joke. So by being that 6th organization that actually uses data, demonstrates it, let's say through a dashboard, or runs the analytics, presents it to the funders, you are differentiating yourself from a whole lot of other organizations that are operating without running this process. And third, honestly, this one is my personal favorite, is simply to ask better questions. People think, hey, I'll run analytics and automatically, I'll be able to improve my products and services. No, I hate to break the bad news. It's not that simple. Even after getting a lot of data, even after collecting a lot of data, you are only increasing your chances of success. You still don't know. There's no 100% guarantee. So to me, that third reason is the best reason. Like, you ask certain questions the first time around, you get certain responses, you get certain result. The next time around, I promise you, you will be better at asking even better questions, which means that you are doing the first one, which is you're improving your chances that your organization is going to succeed in the near term or in the near future. So yeah, these are our reasons. Let's get the practical thing started. Now, for this, I've taken a very simple yet actionable example. My project in this case is like everyone codes. I'm from the tech industry, so I have a bias towards everything that is technical. But this is an example that I would understand better and I will be able to explain better. So hopefully, you'll be able to understand it as well. And please put your questions in Q&A. Please don't hesitate. Any question, and we'll answer that. So my project today is Everyone Codes. And a bit about the project. This is basically about, let's say, conducting coding boot camps, teaching programming and tech skills to young children in an area where they are susceptible to involving in crime, as a result of lack of opportunities. So this is the project that I'm going to go with. In the next few slides, I'm going to first walk you through an entire framework of how we think through, let's say, when we are looking at this project, what we do in order to arrive at, let's say, the questions that we want to ask the stakeholders, the metrics that we are going to keep track of, how we arrive at outcome, and then we will look at, like, how the data is structured. I have some sample data that I have in Google Sheets. So let's get started. First, I know, like, for those of us, and even we were following a certain approach. When you start with a theory of change, you probably start with outcomes. Or if you're more of a big organization, you probably start with your inputs. Hey, like, what resources do we have? We are bringing a small twist here. We are saying, hey, like, don't start with outcomes or inputs. Start with a problem. So when you look at a project, and the reason why we say start with a problem is because there's so many times it happens that we start thinking about outcomes, and the problem actually gets brushed under the carpet. Then at mid stage during the project, you basically don't even know, like, what problem you're solving. So for us, the theory of change needs actually a twist. It needs to start with a problem. So in this case, in Everyone Codes example, the problem statement is youth kids of these ages, 16, 17, and 18, are on the streets involving in crime and susceptible to drug addiction. Big problem. A kind of problem that generally a non-profit would want to solve, right? So from here, how do we construct a structure? Like, obviously, like if this is the problem, your organization does X activities to actually solve this problem. And we've taken exactly that. Obviously, this is part of your theory of change. Like you do some activities as part of your project. So to solve that problem, we are conducting coding boot camps. Obviously, that's our example. So we are conducting coding boot camps. And the other activity is like there are some volunteers that probably go out on the street and they identify kids with some potential. Maybe they run some sort of a test to identify the potential of the kids so that they can be picked up, put into the coding boot camps, and other activities can happen. So let's take the first activity as an example. We take kids off the streets and take them to coding boot camps. So if you're performing an activity to solve this problem, obviously there needs to be an output. And this is again part of the theory of change. It is an immediate result of activity that you would do. So I'm going to click on next. So kids are building apps. Obviously, if they're learning to code, and if they hope to get, let's say, a job in the tech industry, they need to build apps. So let's say the output is kids are building apps. Now, not every kid would build an app. Not everyone would have the same mindset. So let's just say that the output of that first activity is kids are building apps. Then obviously after the output, you would want to think about, hey, outcome as well. You can think about outcome in this stage, or you can think about outcomes right after you do the activities. It's really up to you. Like it depends on the clarity of thought. To me, like if you would do it after an outcome, it probably makes most sense, but that's just me. Like it depends on how you would want to run that process. Once kids are building apps, the outcome that we are working towards with this is one, obviously to take the kids away from a life of crime and drugs, and improve their quality of life by helping them land a job in the tech industry. So that's the overall outcome. Like we want to improve the lives, the quality of lives of these kids for good. So this is not like some temporary intervention that, hey, okay, like once the training is done, the kids are back and they would go back to their, the earlier life that they were in. We don't want to do that. We want the change to be sustaining. So our outcome is actually helping them land a job in the tech industry. Now, if this is the outcome, this is when we generally think of what metric can help us in measuring this particular outcome on a continuous basis. Obviously, I mean, there could be many different, metrics that you could come up with. Depends on, what happens when you would actually brainstorm. But metric obviously needs to be measurable. It needs to be quantified, like quantifiable. Without that, it's very hard. So in our case, what we have taken, let me minimize this. What we have taken as an example is percentage of kids that have enrolled in the coding bootcamp and that went on to pass, let's say, a coding test and then took a job in the tech industry. This is the metric that we are going to keep track of on a continuous basis to measure that outcome. Now, there's also one more thing I'd like to highlight. You can also have metrics for activities and outputs, right? Like you can also say, hey, number of apps that kids built. That is probably an output metric that you would want to measure. And here, the number of kids that you've taken off the street probably is another activity metric that that you would want to measure. Your organization can feel free to think about any of the metrics in any of these stages, but for the sake of this example, I'm tracking this metric to measure this outcome on a continuous basis. So if this is the metric that we want, now we sort of backtrack, thinking, hey, how do I get the data to actually answer to this metric on a continuous basis? So when you say percentage of kids enrolled that went on to pass the test and take a job in the tech industry, obviously you would want the total number of participants in the coding bootcamp itself. Yeah. So that comes from probably your attendance system or some sort of Google Sheet, Excel sheet, whatever that you might be maintaining to keep a track of list of all the kids that actually are participating in the coding bootcamp. Then we also need data on, from those like who participated in the coding bootcamp, who actually took the test and passed it. So for that, obviously there could be like a testing platform. And I'm just making this up as we go. It doesn't have to be that. Maybe you're just doing it one-on-one with the kids. In that case, you would probably make a note of it on a Google Sheet or an Excel sheet, whether they passed the test or not. It depends on how the tests themselves are, administered. But you get the point. Last one is number of kids landing a job in the tech industry post coding bootcamp. Like they pass the test, they're out of coding bootcamp. What are they doing in their lives? Like once they graduate, we need a credible way to do that. So data points are sort of intermediate step between survey and metric that help you calculate this metric, number one. Number two, data points also have sources. In the first one, obviously attendance system. The second one, probably a Google Sheet or an Excel, or even like a test administration platform. And third one, the ones landing a job comes from a survey. And that's why you, as a final step, you would start designing your survey. Now, this survey literally answers this last data point, which is going to help us in calculating this metric that keeps track of this outcome, which is a result of this output, which is a result of this activity, and this activity we do to solve this problem. So this is an entire tree. And by the way, like I've just taken this as an example. There could be many other survey questions that you want to do. The reason why we wanted to run this as a small impact experiment is because when you take the whole thing together, things quickly get confusing. It's super hard to come up with survey questions. You will confuse on metrics and stuff. So what we suggest, or what we generally do, is we pick the problem, we pick 1, 2, max 3 outcomes, we pick a few metrics, and then we design a survey for it. Now, I'm sure Lorena, my colleague, she covered how to ask survey questions in the last session. I mean, for those of you who want to improve on how to ask those questions, there's a good book called The Mom Test. I would suggest you to read that book. You'll get better. Like the more surveys you design after reading that book, you will know. So again, the book is called The Mom Test. Now, once we have this survey question, obviously next is basically to implement. And I'm going to go out of this full screen for a few minutes now, because now I'm going to talk about the data structure, like how do you collect the data, how do you structure the data in a way that lends itself for analysis. Now, what we have experienced is like when there are more questions, when there's more data, when there is more sources of data, it's super hard to do it on the Excel and Google Sheet. And that's why we use slightly, advanced techniques and SQLs and stuff to actually extract the insights. But feel free to use like whatever you are comfortable with. Let's jump in. So I have this Google Sheet here. It has like 4 different tabs: registration, test results. These are the test results from the coding tests, and there's a survey that we conduct on these children post the coding bootcamp. And the analytics tab is more how all of this data we bring together to actually draw the insight. So one thing that I want to really highlight here, and this is also where a lot of things fall apart, is unique ID. I'm using email address as the unique ID, but think of unique ID as anything that uniquely identifies each of the, let's say, the students, right? The reason why this is important is because going back to this metric, right? I hope everyone is able to see my screen. Please let us know if not. Percentage of kids enrolled that went on to pass the test and take a job in the tech industry. This metric cannot be calculated if you do not have a uniquely identifiable information for each of those students. You can calculate percentage of kids enrolled, but it probably won't be accurate because it will have repeat data. Some data will be missing. Some people would have entered it twice. So there is a lot that happens when you don't have a unique ID. If you do, you can like safely rely on this metric showing you an accurate picture. So, and by the way, I'll tell you with 100% confidence, a lot of things fall apart when you don't have a unique ID. In this case, I'm using email. Feel free to use anything, but if you're running a survey, obviously you need an email address, unless you are doing it in some sort of a case management situation where you are in that training session and you are entering all of that information on students. In that case, it's probably easier for you to keep track of the uniqueness, but it's very important. I cannot stress more on that part. And I'll tell you how this helps us in bringing together all of the data that needs to come together. Now, this is your registration information, like who are the students, like what's their names, gender, ethnicity, age, depends on your specific organization's project. You may or may not want to collect this data. We suggest collecting data only on things that actually matter for the organization to improve their product and services, and not everything. Because if you try to collect everything, one, you won't get a whole lot of data because people don't answer long surveys, and two, it's just hard. It takes away your very scarce resources from the main things that you want to do, which is to actually improve your products and services. Trust me, every organization just has limited resources. It depends on how they utilize those resources. You can have 5 hours brainstorming session on literally every data under the sun that you can collect, but it won't help you. Like, we would suggest collect only data that's very helpful. Second, test results, passed or not. Again, like all of this is fictitious data. Like, there's nothing real here. I'm just taking you through a simple exercise of how we do things. Again, has the unique ID, and I'll tell you why this is important. And then it has a column whether the test was passed or not. Then you have a survey. Again, obviously email addresses, but you're also asking questions on, hey, what are you doing after coding bootcamp? Like, did you get a job in the tech industry? What's your annual compensation? Remember, our metric was, or our outcome was, quality of life improvement for these children who are part of the coding bootcamp. And we are directly tying it to the compensation that helps them, let's say, lead a quality life and away from the life of crime and drugs, for example. So we are asking them these two. And that's the reason why we are asking them these two questions. Now, since our metric was, and I'm going to just write it down here instead of going back and forth, on the presentation. Percentage of kids that participated in the coding bootcamp and that went on to pass the test and took a job in the tech industry. I think I was able to reproduce that metric. Yeah. So this is the metric we are going to keep track of. Now, you need data from this because this has total number of children that actually participated in the coding bootcamp. By the way, you can bring in a lot of complexity here as well. And generally, things are not this simple. I'm taking a very simplistic case here. There are cohorts, there are multiple sessions of the training. So when that happens, your techniques will also change a little. They are slightly more advanced, will require more data crunching, but you will get the idea. We have the total number of people here, and I'm considering just one cohort, and this is just one training at a time, and this is one snapshot at a time. That's what I'm considering in this example. And then you have test results. You need this as well. This comes from a different system. This probably comes from your registration. And then you also need to combine those two data points with the survey. That's when you get this data point where, did you get a job in the tech industry? Yes. What's your annual compensation? We get it from the survey. We are getting the test passed from test results. We get the total number of participants from registration. And email, again, like you can use this, or this to get your email addresses. So this is how the data needs to come together in order for you to, and I'm going to copy this and paste it here, answer this question. And this helps you keep track of the outcome that you came up with in the first place. Let me, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. I'm next going to talk about how you would design a typical dashboard. And this is also from the perspective of learning rather than, let's say, staying in compliance with, I don't know, some ESG regulation that some organization may be wanting you to. I'm not talking from that perspective. I'm talking from the perspective of having an outcome or impact demonstrable dashboard that helps your internal team to learn from data on a continuous basis and to ask better questions. This, to me, is not like one number that you would keep track of and say, hey, yeah, we are like wildly successful. I would use this as an opportunity to ask better questions the next time around. And you will see, like, you do this on a continuous basis, you will get better at it, and you will also make your company better or your organization better. So with that, I'm going to switch to dashboard. This is a very sample dashboard out of, and by the way, we are using this data to actually come up with this dashboard. So the most important visualization here is actually this and this data point, which is out of the total registered, 50% of the kids are able to clear the test and get jobs in the tech industry. This is the metric that we are trying to keep track of. And the reason why I directly highlighted this is now suddenly, if I had to explain to you the entire dashboard, I would probably take like 7-8 minutes, which would bring us closer to the close of this webinar. But I chose to highlight this because that's what you started to do in the first place. I just chose to divert my resources to this one visualization. And I'm trying to drive a point that don't do a lot, do less, but I think do it well. So with this out of the way, like typically, like how we structure the dashboard is through 5 dimensions of impact. And for those of you who don't know, there's a ton of resource out there on our website on 5 dimensions of impact, how you would structure it. Just to quickly go through these 5 dimensions. Who takes care of who your stakeholder is? In this case, those are the children ages 16, 17, and 18 in that specific area who are closer to life of crime and drugs. So who talks about the stakeholders, how underserved they are, and in general, like, their background. Now, I would suggest you to collect data on those things only and only if it helps you in improving your products and services for them. Otherwise, if it does not impact, or if it doesn't impact your decision-making ability, why even bother? Second, what is the outcome, right? Like it's all about outcomes. So what is it that your in this case, the children, what are their expectations? Obviously, you cannot make someone do things against their will. So we are trying to understand from their perspective, hey, what's your expectation? Do you enjoy this life, or do you want to do something else? And that what dimension focuses on data, specifically on that. Then how much is about the outcome that we are creating through our products and services on these children, for example. How much of this outcome is really happening? Meaning, it's basically across scale, depth, and duration, right? Now, I mentioned earlier that we want this change to be sustaining. Any organization that is, doing its projects or products and services, it wants the change experienced by its stakeholders to be sustaining. Otherwise, there's going to be drop-off. It's just going to be one stopgap arrangement. I can also take the children, for a while out in the park and give them probably a sandwich. That only solves that problem for 30, 40 minutes. But we want to do it for good. And that's why we are keeping track of, hey, how many of them actually get jobs in tech industry so that their lives change for good. Then contribution, very important for every organization. The reason why this data is important, by the way, we didn't cover data on contribution and risk. We only covered data on who, what, and probably to some extent how much. Contribution is, it's possible that these kids are, I don't know, they are in their own time learning some coding, they're taking up some coding classes, and maybe that helped them more in landing a job than your course. And if that's the case, you need to know, and you have to think through what kind of data is going to give you an understanding of how uniquely your organization is serving that need, so that you can continuously change your stakeholders' lives on a continuous basis. Otherwise, what's going to happen is, at some point, people will think, hey, this doesn't help me so much, the other thing helps me, and they're just going to go there. So it also poses a risk. And typically, we would call it drop-off risks. There are different types of risks. I think IMP suggests like 9 types of risks, if I'm not wrong. Please feel free to go on our website. There is a ton of content on impact management project. There are a lot of videos as well. You will get a lot better understanding. That survey question that we asked obviously belongs to how much and what, because that focuses on the outcome. But we didn't really ask any survey questions on contribution, risk, and there were a few on who, like how we saw on the dashboard. We also want to know, the ethnicity, like what educational qualification. Now, I don't want to be serving, children that I know will never benefit out of, the courses that they are taking. I want to maximize the impact that my organization has. And that is only possible if I know who among those children are most receptive. And that's where, the information on who actually helps you. Again, the point here is to collect information that will help you in moving the needle rather than just collecting, because that will, trust me, take away resources from your org onto something that has no bearing on what you as an organization would do. And then again, like in this case, age of participants, the stakeholder is identified very clear in this, like 16, 17, and 18. But still, there are a few people that are over the age of 18, at least in the sample data. And yeah, what and how much. And that's where this most important visualization of all comes directly from this. And we use some techniques to actually bring all of the data together so that you can actually draw out insights. And on a continuous basis, as you collect more and more, survey data, registration data, you can. And as I was explaining earlier, this is a very simple case. There could be cohorts. You could be analyzing this information over time. There could be many other factors that will influence how you would analyze this data. So you would have to brainstorm that within your organization to actually be able to do that. Annual compensation, again, to us, we are considering it as a big indicator of quality of life improvement, and that's why we have data on quality of life. And in this case, 60% of the kids who have cleared their test, they have a compensation of above 80,000 USD, from being near to crime and drugs to going to this state. It's a big impact, fictitious one, but still big. So yeah, I mean, please, I think we can pause here and answer some questions. I don't know, Unmesh, Hetal, if there are questions on Q&A that we can take and answer.
Thank you, Madhu. So there's a lot of questions that we answered already online. Essentially, many of them are still trying to understand how to design the dashboard effectively, per se. And I know you have gone through some of the best practices altogether. Something that I would like to add to that one is to designing a dashboard has to start with essentially the primary purpose. So main thing that Madhu talked about is purely from the impact experiment perspective. That is a one objective, and that objective is it should be kind of ingrained into the organization's daily work altogether. Because what Madhu talked about is actually not rocket science. It's something that you can implement on a regular basis. And that's something you do it for improving your own products and services altogether. And any nonprofit and social enterprise can take these techniques and operationalize it on a very short period of time. It's a lean approach that you can use to continuously gather the data. Now, there is a whole sort of science and art of improving data storytelling. That is beyond the scope of today's workshop, but I have shared an article with you that I wrote not too long ago. That's on the Sopact website. It's an art of the impact data storytelling, and it's not a storytelling by article. It's more about how to communicate the evidence-based approach to the funders, to the other communicators, to the other stakeholders. It could be even clients for that matter. So all those things requires you to go through systematic way to define the process. First, it could be more about how do you align with the larger goals, maybe sustainable development goal, target, what is the main impact goal you have. All those things we started in the first workshop, starting to build IMM toolkit. You can start with that documentation and then essentially aligning your questions and results through the 5 dimensions of impact, which gives you enormous understanding of who your stakeholders are, what is the outcome you're creating, what is the scale and depth of impact. Many of you were also asking about attribution, and there's the long discussion we can have about attribution versus contribution, which is beyond the scope of the workshop today. We believe the contribution is the right way to really see it. Essentially, attribution means that you are trying to continuously attribute somebody's funding. And in our opinion, that creates more of a friction rather than solves the problem. Rather, we want to make sure people focus on a contribution aspect. And everybody needs to think about attribution. So when we started our discussion with Miller Center, that was the first major issue that came out, that we are trying to collect the data, and our funders wants to see what is the what is the attribution of our work. And we said, no, rather than attribution, let's talk about what is your contribution towards the social enterprises that you are working with it. So Miller Center needs to think about their contribution, and all their social enterprise needs to think about contribution towards their stakeholders altogether. So those are the very important best practices that is ingrained in the IMP, Impact Management Project. which is quite useful. So we have shared all those examples on that article, and I highly recommend you to bookmark that article and review that carefully altogether. Again, this is a deep subject, but I hope that this effort, that work that Madhu has done, that really helps you get thinking about how to use this impact experiment as approach and gain faster insights into your product and market altogether. So please keep on applying that approach. I would like to maybe invite Andy. Andy, if you can close out the workshop, because this is a series that we started with 3 months ago, and obviously we have a variety of participations from first session to second session. But maybe if you want to share your last thought about what you would like everyone to learn from it and how you want to see, and maybe again share your objective of your Miller Center program.
Yeah, thanks, Umesh, and thanks, Madhu, for a great presentation. I mean, these are complex topics, and there's so many different cases. I was following along with the chat and the Q&A, and I think seeing over 100 people participating today, the content Madhu was presenting, maybe I think we all have to be creative about taking those ideas and doing what's right for our company. So there's not really any one kind of right size fits all approach. And I mean, I saw some really good questions about, like, we're a small organization, how do we do it in a way that's going to be taken as credible by larger funders? And I think I just want to reinforce something that Madhu mentioned, and especially Umesh, I saw reinforcing in the Q&A. If we always say at Miller Center, if as a social entrepreneur, if you're trying to please your funders and your donors, you're not going to get as far. We've all been there. Those of us that have run organizations where, yeah, we need funders and donors, but if you're serious about the impact, build your organization to work for your beneficiaries and just keep that as your focus. And I think the kinds of examples Madhu was giving and the points Umesh was making are really important. It's just like, focus on, is what we're doing working for the beneficiaries, for the customers, for those stakeholders, and how can we learn from it in fast cycles? And sure, the impact we're trying for, you're not going to see for 3 or 5 years. We can't necessarily document or even claim that our program worked for that. But what are the things we can measure that make us think we're going in the right direction? And if you can just do those fast cycles, like what Madhu was saying, something we can measure, act on it, measure it, act on it, that just keeping that focus, then those other things, there'll be ways to solve those other problems, but just keeping your north and focus is really important. So I think that was one of my takeaways from this webinar series. Again, easy to say, hard to do. But for those of you trying to do this, again, you've got Sopact. They've got a lot of resources on their website. I know they've given some follow-up support to many of you. You've got organizations like Miller Center. I'll put again I put this at the beginning, but if our accelerator programs will help you do everything that I was just talking about and that Madhu and Umesh were talking about. So it's tough, but you're not alone. So reach out to organizations that can help you, and just stay true to the purpose of your organization, and you'll all get there. So thanks to everyone for sticking with this 3-part series. And again, a big thanks to Sopact, the Sopact team, for being a great partner for Miller Center and a great resource for the whole ecosystem. Again, I know for those of you who are coming to the Bay Area for the SoCap conference next month, Miller Center will be there with a booth. I know the Sopact team will be there. So, please do stay in touch and continue your journey. So thanks everyone for attending. Thanks to the Sopact team. Have a great day or evening.
Thank you, Andy, and thanks everyone.